Well, thank you all for coming out. Once again, my name is Scott Kuykendall. I'm the Water Resources Specialist from the McHenry County Department of Planning and Development. I help oversee our county's scientific research into water resources, and as Chairman Buehler indicated, we really have a lot to be very proud of in the county. We've done more to understand our water in McHenry County than any other county in the state. We actually walk the talk. It's not just lip service that we provide. I also help with public policy to help protect our water. Every living being on the planet needs water. Because water is so vital to life, it's also our #1 economic driver. Nobody's going to invest in homes or businesses without access to safe, clean, reliable, and affordable water. Our drinking water comes from groundwater. That groundwater is fed by stormwater. Our land use affects the availability and the quality of that stormwater. So everything is interconnected. And so that is why we're talking about watersheds tonight. How water interacts in our watershed has a direct impact on our water availability and our economic development opportunities. And watersheds help us confine an area and actually identify issues within that watershed boundary and then enable us to act on that. And so we're going to be learning all about watersheds today. I'm just out of curiosity, who has participated in a watershed development plan in the past? Okay, a lot of hands. Hopefully every hand will be up next time I ask that question in a couple years. But we're going to bring up our first guest speaker, Cecily Coons with Baxter and Woodman. I've known Cecily for many years, and I knew that we were in similar fields, but I was at a program where she was talking about what is watershed, what are watersheds, and what is watershed planning, and I was just blown away. This person knew what she was talking about. And so I'm thrilled to have her here today to talk about what watersheds are and what watershed planning entails. And each presentation is going to be building on the next one. So this really is a cohesive program. I've been referring to it as a master class in watershed planning. So we're all very honored tonight to start out our program with Cecily Coons. Thanks, Cecily.
All right, thanks everybody. And thank you, Scott. Your passion is truly inspiring. So today I'm going to talk to you about watersheds and watershed planning. You've heard that word a bunch of times already today. So we're going to start with Watersheds 101. What is a watershed and how does it work? And then we're going to talk about watershed-based planning and what's included in a watershed-based plan. We're going to talk a little bit about common sources of surface water pollution and an action plan and recommendations that are typically included in a watershed plan, as well as what the typical guide to implementation might look like, because we don't want to just write the plans, we want to implement the work recommended in the plans. So what is a watershed? Well, think of a bathtub where all the water that comes from a shower head goes to the drain. A watershed works the same way, but on land. So all the water that falls on the land surface within a watershed drains to a common point, a lake or a stream. Watersheds do not follow political boundaries, and that's important to know. They follow topography. So we got to bring a lot of people together from a lot of different communities in each watershed in order to make actionable plans. So watersheds come in all shapes and sizes, and they are basically a nested hierarchy. So if you remember from grade school, almost all of the water in Illinois drains to the Mississippi. That's obviously like the largest of the size watersheds that we might have. But there are many smaller watersheds nested within that. And if you look at McHenry County, which is highlighted in red there, you can see that the county is covered, basically split between two larger watersheds, names that you might be familiar with. On the western side of the county is the Kishwaukee River, and on the eastern portion is the Fox River, the upper Fox River Basin. So years ago, the U.S. Geological Society developed a way of basically assigning zip codes, if you will, or addresses to watersheds, and they called them hydrologic unit codes. But essentially, the numbers indicate the size of the watershed. So starting with the largest watersheds, a Huck 2, if you will, that would be something along the lines of the Mississippi. And every time you add 2 digits, you're getting more granular or a smaller nested version of a watershed within the larger one. So, and the watershed-based planning, which I'm going to be talking about today, mostly happens at the Huck 12 level. So this is a snapshot of what the 2 larger watersheds in McHenry County look like, and it's just a snapshot of some of the many named streams. So on the Kishwaukee side, all of those, the Piscataquis, Lawrence Creek, Mokler Creek, Geryoon, Rush, and Coon, all drain to the Kishwaukee. And then on the Fox side, Nipperstink, Vanderkar, Boone, and Dutch, and Sleepy Hollow Creeks, as well as the Crystal Lake outlet, they all drain to the Fox. And you've seen some of the booths of some of those watershed groups out front. So what is watershed planning? It's a voluntary, community-supported process that assesses the health of watersheds and develops strategies to improve them. And it's an opportunity to bring the community together to share in the work and cost of restoring our watersheds. It took all of us to get to the state we're in today, and it's going to take all of us working together to repair our watersheds. Most of my work focuses specifically on watershed-based plans. That is a very particular name. They might also be referred to as 9-element plans or 319 plans. It is a type of planning process that was created by the US EPA. They focus on ways of improving water quality and protecting watersheds and encouraging the development of assessment reports, management plans, and then implementation of those plans. And the planning process leads to the identification of restoration projects and policy changes. It is a voluntary program, meaning that it's not regulated. EPA and others provide funding to incentivize people to do the work. So that's really important. Having a watershed-based plan opens the door to funding opportunities to get that work done. So why do you want a watershed plan? Well, to determine the health of your watershed, quantify the restoration needed to improve water quality, identify those actionable projects on the ground that can restore water quality, and build that support for implementing the plan during the planning process, and then to prioritize those projects for funding. So we have a list of which ones are most important and the ones we want to start with. So who typically leads the watershed planning process? It's typically led by a single municipal leader or a watershed champion. And we've some watershed champions here in the room today. Regardless of who completes the plan, it benefits all of the residents and municipalities within that community. And typically during the planning process, the cost of the plan itself is shared out amongst the municipalities within that watershed. And the planning process can pay for itself. Again, there are programs out there that will get you funding to implement the projects, and if you were to get funding for even one stream restoration project, you're probably going to get back twice as much as what you would have put in to the planning process itself. So I'm realizing there's a bunch of you in the room that might be in this shot. So the steps of the watershed planning process start with building those partnerships with the community. First and foremost, we're going to assess and characterize the watershed, what's going on, the existing conditions. We're going to develop goals and identify actionable solutions to repair water quality and design an implementation program to get the work done over time. And then also in the plan, there's basically a way to measure plan progress over time and monitor and making sure that what we're doing is remedying the issues. The watershed planning process might last 1.5 years or 2 years, and over that time period, usually we're meeting every other month. So again, building those partnerships. So taking a step back, I've been talking a lot about repairing water quality. So let's talk a little bit about what affects our water quality. Water pollution, surface water pollution comes sort of in two main sources. The first is permitted sources, or point sources, which include things like wastewater treatment plants, industrial polluters, and construction sites. All of these are permitted sources. So that means Illinois Environmental Protection Agency has permits with these entities, and they agree on what those entities are allowed to discharge. A watershed-based plan focuses on everything else, which is basically considered non-point source pollution. So overland flow, any pollution that might come from urban sources off of streets and parking lots, or agricultural areas, or stream bank erosion. So again, that's the focus of a watershed-based plan. There are basically 3 main pollutants that we focus on in these plans, and those are nutrients, which are nitrogen and phosphorus, and sediment. Nutrients are obviously necessary for plant growth. We need that in order to grow our crops so we can eat. But some of those same nutrients are very detrimental to water systems, aquatic systems. Aquatic plants cannot take up nutrients at the same pace as plants on land. And it can cause algal blooms and accelerated plant growth and lead to fish kills. Sources of nutrients include stream bank erosion, agricultural runoff, lawn fertilizers, failing septic systems, and some of those permitted sources that we mentioned earlier. Sediment reduces light penetration and oxygen levels, and it can clog fish gills and make it harder for fish to see and be able to hunt and feed. And it can also settle out in streams and lakes. We might have to do, causing the need for dredging, et cetera. And it can also lead to flooding if it's clogging some of our sewers. Sources of sediment include stream bank erosion and bare banks, construction practices, site grading and land disturbance, agricultural row crop runoff and soil loss, and increased impervious surfaces. So all of things that we all deal with in both urban and rural areas. So a watershed plan is going to include an action plan, which essentially serves as a roadmap to how we can restore water quality. That action plan is typically divided into 2 components. The first half is a programmatic section, which includes policy recommendations and watershed-wide recommendations, things we could do anywhere, like this is a type of practice we might want to install. And then the other half of the action plan is the site-specific measures. Those include the on-the-ground project that we would have found early on in the planning process, and include things like stream bank restoration projects, et cetera. Just there, in any one watershed plan, there are usually many policy recommendations, and McHenry County is already doing a lot of these, but typically, first and foremost, we would include, we want to have the communities adopt the plan so they can implement it. We would encourage ordinance reviews and updates, green infrastructure network protection, sensible salting programs. I know McHenry County has a pretty amazing sensible salting program already. Conservation design and low-impact development guidance, green stormwater management, septic system maintenance, native landscaping, and pavement alternatives. And then the site-specific measures, and these vary from watershed to watershed, but most commonly they're going to include, this is listed here, stream bank and riparian area restorations, first and foremost, wetland restorations, detention basin retrofits, agricultural practices, and then other urban BMPs such as rain gardens, permeable pavers, and bioswales. And I know Brad and Michelle will be talking about some of these various measures in their presentations. And all of these are meant to address water quality, but almost all of them also include flooding benefits. So they're definitely going to provide multiple benefits for the community. We include a site-specific action plan table in all of our plans. Probably boring for the average person, but it's basically a big long list of maybe upwards of 200 projects of where we have done the homework ahead of time so that the community is ready to go out for funding for these. It's going to include information on where the site is located and what those existing conditions are, what our recommendations are to restore that site, an expected load reduction for removing some of those pollutants, a priority, and then some guidelines on who is responsible for implementing those projects. But the point is, it's ready to go out for grant funding. And then there's a whole section of the plan dedicated to how we're going to implement them. It includes a schedule for all of those projects, as well as an identification of roles and responsibilities for like who is going to be doing the implementation. An information and education program. How are we going to get the words out about the plan so that we know what recommendations are included? It's going to include a water quality monitoring time component. How are we going to measure water quality to know that over time we are making improvements? And if we're not making improvements, we want to know that so that we can adjust and adapt our plan accordingly. And then it's also going to include potential funding sources. So I've mentioned up at the top that a watershed-based plan opens the door for funding through the 319 program, but it also opens the door to other federal and state programs. And they cover a whole range of topics, including water quality, restoration, agriculture, flooding, and stormwater management, wildlife habitat, and recreation and trails grants. And there's also limited funding available to do the planning work itself through a couple different programs through IUPA. But with that, I'll turn it back to Scott to cue up our next speaker.
Well, thank you, Cecily. And when we talk about green infrastructure, what we're talking about in large part are native plants. So before we started urbanizing the landscape, the majority of rain that would land on the ground would actually infiltrate down into the ground. Very little of it actually would run off as surface runoff. When we urbanize areas, we compact the soil and pave over it. So instead of water infiltrating down and recharging our aquifers, it is going off as sheet flow and creating a flood stage followed by drought. What we're trying to do is restore that natural hydrology. So native plants have deep root systems that will go down up to 15 feet. And the deep root systems are only part of the story. They get a little bit more credit than they deserve, but it's a deep root system and then all the lateral roots that those root systems provide. They restore soil health. They're bringing carbon, nutrients down into the soil, restoring soil health, so that entire soil profile becomes a giant sponge. And so the number one way we can manage stormwater in the county is actually going back to what worked before we urbanized the areas, native landscaping. And nobody has done that better than the village of Algonquin in our area. I worked in the private sector for most of my career. I did a late in life career change coming to the county. And I have looked for role models to help inspire me on how to do my job. I feel privileged to be able to do what I do. And I have a deep love and appreciation for McHenry County. So I have looked for role models to emulate. And probably one of the best people I've met is Michelle Zimmerman. So she is the Assistant Director of Public Works for the Village of Algonquin and has really helped lead that village in a lot of the accomplishments that they've done. And I think that they can be a great role model for other municipalities, and they certainly are being a role model for the county. So I'd like to introduce Michelle Zimmerman, Assistant Director of Public Works and future Nobel Prize winner.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for bringing all of this to the forefront of McHenry County. Just to give everybody a little bit more information about that stuff. So Cecily talked about having a watershed plan, and now I'm going to talk about, you've got this great document, and you don't want it to sit on the shelf. It's got all this great stuff that you can do in it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you implement that plan. In the village of Algonquin, we are in two major watersheds, the Woods Creek watershed and the Jalkey Fox River watershed. You can see where we are right here. I'm going to talk about what we've done specifically in the village of Algonquin in these watersheds to implement the things in our watershed plans. First question is, why do you want to implement your watershed plan? The plan has a lot of goals in it, and that you're trying to achieve benefits for your community and you're trying to mitigate problems that you have in your community. We also have all regulations now. We have our MS4 permits, our county stormwater ordinances, other things that require actionable items that are coming up. Some of the goals that we're trying to achieve: stormwater runoff storage. So we want to reestablish or increase volume in detention basins. Stormwater infiltration and water quality. We want to do some flood mitigation. All of our communities are probably experiencing that a lot now. So we want to reestablish the floodplain connections that we have. We are, as Cecily talked about, trying to stop and lessen erosion and sediment control. And then tertiary benefit of all this is wildlife habitat, biodiversity, and beautification. Just some examples of all of these goals that we've done in Algonquin. This is where we were recreating runoff storage. So this area back here was a detention basin. It's all grown in with invasive species. Here's the detention basin. We did a restoration and we reestablished the detention. We dredged this out. Every time it would rain, it would overflow this basin and run down the street and flood out 2 or 3 garages. So we don't have that problem anymore. And lo and behold, when we did the restoration, there was a beautiful oak woodland behind this detention basin. This was a project we did. We've done many of these for water quality. So we have the typical turf grass detention basins that were built back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And I think all of them in Algonquin now we have retrofitted to naturalization. So you can see the benefits we get with that, with water infiltrating and filtering through this. It cleans it and before it sends it downstream. Flood mitigation. This is a creek restoration project that we did. We had some flooding would always occur here where there's a culvert, there's a house over here. We would flood out the house with this creek because this is what it used to look like. The water couldn't flow, the banks were eroded, and everything would the debris would get jammed up and it would flood out all over this area. Erosion and sediment control. Like I said, we've done many projects for this, creek projects, some before and after. And just so you know, on all these pictures I'm taking, I am standing relatively in the same place on the before and after photos. So you really get a perspective of what it looks like when it's done. So here we're restoring the stream, reestablishing the floodplain, and why that's important is I want to show you this little video. This is after a 4-inch rainfall, so you can see the creek is staying in its channel. We have cross veins, we have stone toe protection. All of this helps with that erosion control and sending the water correctly downstream. So that's how your creek restoration should look and they should work after you have a significant rain event. And then we create biodiversity, we create habitat, we help beautify the community. We do this with all kinds of projects. Here we have a pollinator project that we did on a sled hill. We restored an oak savanna. We've done a couple of oak restorations in the village. This is our Spella wetland. I like to show this slide because when we do restorations, it looks like a bomb went off. We have to remove a lot of the invasive species and we do a lot of tree removal. And one of the big things that everybody says, the wildlife is gonna go away, you're scaring the deer, it's never gonna come back, what are you doing? And it's just a good example of that this is really their native habitat. This is a detention basin and this is a very large buck that was in the village, and you can see that you can barely see him because they blend in and this is where they want to be, and they come back in full force after our restoration projects. So the next thing is to figure out where we want to implement our projects. Cecily talked about this a lot. In your watershed plan, you will have a list of action items. This will list all the things that you can do in the watershed, who owns them, if they're critical areas so that you can prioritize them, and kind of a cost estimate and a timing for the projects. So now we get to the how. How do we implement our watershed plan? I think there's 3 key steps to doing this to really have success. You need a cheerleader. You need to make the watershed plan part of your code and your planning and your documents that are within your organization. And then obviously you need money to fund it. So guess who the cheerleader is? Always have been, always will be. Go Watershed. Let me go back here. So I'll let you guess which one I'm up here from high school. Your cheerleader needs to educate your board, educate your residents, get the word out there, stand up for wanting to do the projects and stand up for what it is and what it stands for. The cheerleader will help write codes, attend meetings, coordinate things. This person needs to make sure to interface with your community development, public works, other organizations, get the teamwork going, make this happen. Those of you who know me, I have been with the village for 30 years. So you know what that means, that you should have a succession plan for who the next cheerleader is going to be. Our next speaker, Brad Andreessen, who's also the village ecologist. Brad has also been a cheerleader. So he was rightfully the next person in line for the job. So the other, a next step in your implementation is making everything part of your code. Have your board adopt your watershed plan. Super important. If it's not part of your code, not part of your requirements, you're really gonna have trouble enforcing it. We first adopted the Woods Creek Watershed Plan in 2013. We just updated both of our watershed plans this year, so they're new and great in 2025, ready for the next 10 years. You want to also create and adopt other codes, ordinances, regulations within your organization or your municipality. We obviously adopted the King County Stormwater Ordinance in Algonquin. With that, you want to get rid of any old or outdated other plans you have so they're not conflicting when you need to go implement them or use them. We wrote a conservation design ordinance. This sets standards for our green infrastructure network, what it consists of, what it should look like, what green space should be set aside, buffers, connectivity, all of that. And then a really important thing is to make sure your agency's comp plan mirrors what's in your watershed plan. So we use this a lot for new development. Here is our watershed plan, and it shows our priority of green infrastructure areas. Then the village's comp plan has this directly shown in here with the coding that it's a natural area overlay district. Anybody who comes into the village looking at your comp plan, looking to build or do anything, knows right off the bat that this is your game plan and you've got it set and you've got it prioritized in your agency. So finally, we have to fund the projects, which is usually one of the most difficult parts of the implementation of the plan. First thing one step that you can do is you can create other fees in your community, in your organization. We created a watershed fee for new development. You can see the costs up here for that. It was about 2008 when we started implementing all of this and adopting the stormwater ordinances. So since then, we've collected $169,000 from 2008 to date. This we've used to do a lot of these detention basin retrofits, which I was telling you about. Here's another example of our Blue Ridge detention basin. That was turf grass, and then we made it a little wetland complex. You can use the stormwater ordinance. The county stormwater ordinance often have measures in them for collecting fees and getting funding for doing projects. The King County stormwater ordinance allows individual municipalities or agencies to collect the fees ourselves. So that ordinance has a wetland mitigation fee for isolated wetlands or anything that's not under the jurisdiction of the Corps. We can charge a fee in lieu of wetland, which we charge $100,000 per acre. We also have a fee in lieu of a detention, which we don't use often, but sometimes we do. That's the cost of the land plus the cost to construct the facility. So over the years since implementing this, we've collected about $900,000 using these fees. We use these to do a little bit bigger projects. This is similar to the Surrey Lane project that I talked about previously. There was a detention basin behind all of this that was just full of phragmite and cattail and honeysuckle, buckthorn. We cleaned it all out. We reestablished the detention basin volume, and we made a nice little, we call this the Gaslight Park Bird and Butterfly Sanctuary. Another way, Cecily talked about this a little bit, is to get grants. There's a lot of things out there, EPA, private grants, ComEd, clean energy. Soil and water conservation districts often have funding for your projects. DECO, we've gotten funding from them. And you can see the amounts that we've collected over the years through our grant funding. I just highlighted here an EPA 319 grant, which was our Rat Creek Reach 5 stabilization. So we did a stream bank project, pulled back the banks, cleaned it up, reconnected the floodplain, and made an upland prairie area. And there's an oak woodland up in here too that we restored. Another great way to get your projects is have new development coming in. If you have that opportunity in your community or agency, have them build and put the green infrastructure into your community. Since development started back up about 5 or 6 years ago, we've had all these different subdivisions and areas come in where we have required that they create and give us green infrastructure. Between all of these, they've installed about 87 acres of this that they've dedicated to the village. The value of that 87 acres is about $4.3 million. I'm highlighting here just how we use those codes and plans to make that happen. The watershed plan has this area as in our green infrastructure network. It was a golf course. A developer came in, wanted to make it a subdivision. We used the conservation design ordinance, all of that, to make this beautiful meandering wetland detention natural area. About a third of the subdivision is green infrastructure that was dedicated to the village. We're going into like our 4th year of establishing that, and it's just absolutely gorgeous, beautiful. That project alone was worth $1.6 million, about a $1.6 million value. Finally, you also can create some other local funding sources. Our board has been so supportive of our green infrastructure program, what we're doing, the environmental aspects of bringing in new development, what that means for the village, for groundwater, for clean water. So we have a telecommunications tax, which we have put towards doing projects, doing maintenance of projects. We also collect the local sales tax, and they support us in putting those dollars towards doing restoration projects. All in all, through these funding sources, we've implemented about $7 million worth of projects using these taxing sources. This is just a smaller one where there was a prairie adjacent to a creek on Bunker Hill Drive, and this is what it looked like before and what it looks like now. Another option for getting projects done is to build them into other construction projects. So I'm Public Works and I'm the cheerleader, so I have an advantage to adding these into a lot of the things that we're doing in the village. An example is we got federal funding for a road project, and we were widening the road, so we had to put in extra detention, and we made the detention basins naturalized. So federal funding helped for paying for that green infrastructure. Presidential Park, we just got an OSLOD grant, and we put in naturalized detentions in Presidential Park. So the OSLOD funding helped pay for that. And then Dixie Creek Reach 5, which is this, we had to do a sanitary sewer project there and some lift station upgrades. We had to replace a force main and increase it. So we had to get into the creek area, the riparian area, do a bunch of tree removal, so we decided to do the restoration as part of that project. So we were able to use the user fees from water and sewer to tie these two projects together and get this creek restoration done. Some other ideas that you can utilize, we do not do these in the village of Algonquin. We have all those other measures that we implement, but you can certainly establish special service areas and collect fees to fund some of your projects. You can establish a stormwater utility fee in whatever way that looks like for impervious area in your community, and you can work with a lot of nonprofit organizations out there. Sometimes they will help you install the projects. If you have projects installed, they will sometimes help you with the maintenance, the long-term maintenance of this. Brad's going to talk a lot about the importance of what that is. So basically, to sum it up, we have funded about $14 million worth of projects in the village of Algonquin through all of our different funding sources. None of that was property tax money, none of it. It was all the mechanisms that I have spoken to you about. I leave you with, it's possible. You can do it, you can make this happen. One of my favorite things is teamwork makes the dream work. And with that, Brad is going to talk to you a little bit about long-term maintenance of these and a little bit of, once we've got the funding, how they are constructed and get built.
Thanks, Michelle. Great cheerleader and very inspiring. Thanks for being a great role model. And our next speaker is also a great role model. So we're going to be introducing Brad Andresen. I've known Brad for several years. I knew him back when he was in the private sector. So similar to me, he spent much of his career in the private sector before coming to the village of Algonquin. And his title is Chief Ecologist. And now that's not a title you hear often associated with a municipality, but it should be. All this green infrastructure that we're talking about needs somebody that is actually knowledgeable on ecology, can identify one plant against another. If you build these things, how do you measure success if you don't understand how natural systems work? So I think chief ecologist or ecologist should be a standard position in every municipality. And Brad has many different roles. It's not just identifying one plant against another. He does many different things for the village. But I really do think that this is something important for municipalities to take very seriously. We are looking to do more green infrastructure in McHenry County, and managing that green infrastructure is critical. If we spend all this money to do these things and don't take care of them, that's not a good investment. We really want to receive all the benefits that you can derive from the green infrastructure, but it does require maintenance. There is no such thing as maintenance-free. Asphalt requires maintenance. So it really requires people who know what they're doing. And Brad knows what he's doing. When I knew him in the private sector, I was ask him questions, and he was able to explain very complex ideas in very practical, mechanical terms. And so Brad really knows what he's talking about. He understands the science and mechanics of natural systems, and it really is a great skill to have. And he is also a role model for a great public servant. He brings so much energy to his job and is so willing to go out of his way above and beyond to do things, and that includes speaking with us today. So let's welcome Brad Andresen, Chief Ecologist.
Thank you, Scott. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Super excited to get to talk to such a large group about what we're doing in the village of Algonquin. Thanks to Cecily and Michelle for really setting me up to be able to go into kind of the nuts and the bolts about, okay, we had this amazing plan. Fantastic, we got it passed by our board. Awesome, we got money, we got grants. Now let's go ahead and put the shovels in the ground. Let's build these projects. And then after they're built, now we got to maintain these. How do we do that? So I'm going to be going over some of those details, including some tips and tricks that we've learned over the years in the village of Algonquin during the construction phase. We're going to talk about some design considerations, some of those things that Michelle and Cecily were alluding to as far as reconnecting the floodplain and the creek together for some hazard mitigation benefits, stuff like that. And then we're going to talk about some of the lessons we've learned over the years implementing these projects in the village of Algonquin. We've had some times where we're like, ooh, I think we're going to do something different next time. So we're going to talk about those. And then really the bulk of what I'm going to talk about is this green infrastructure maintenance. We've been to a lot of these talks all around. I've heard a lot of people talk about building the projects, funding the projects. It's the maintenance of the projects that really doesn't get quite as much attention. And then we're going to talk about some of the benefits and successes, some of the things that we've realized in the village of Algonquin after building all these projects over the past 20 years. So as you can see, this is the third time now one of these action plans has been up on the screen. Bring it back to your school days. If something is repeated, that means it's probably important, right? Yes, that's very important. These action plans are our roadmap to be able to complete projects. And just for example, this is a snippet from the Woods Creek Restoration Plan that was done in 2013. And since then, just for stream restoration, the village of Algonquin has completed 4 of those projects. We have one project that's designed and permitted. We're currently have applied for an EPA 319 grant, so everybody keep your fingers crossed that we get that so we can construct this project next year. And then we have 2 other reaches that are future projects that are on our list to complete as we move through. So, like I said, these are very important action plans that are something that you can move through with that homework being done, and you can just go through the list and the prioritization is done for you. Ecological restoration, I've heard that a few times tonight. What does that mean? It's really important to have a clear view of what ecological restoration means to you and your organization before you undertake one of these projects. Typically, it means restoring using native vegetation. There's a lot of gray area in there, native to what time frame, what ecosystem, what book, what research, but that's the base level of it. We're typically looking to restore these areas to pre-European settlement conditions. So before Europeans came over, put a plow to everything, put agricultural drain tile in, drained all the wetlands. There are a lot of design, permitting, maintenance considerations when working on an ecological restoration project. For example, a place like NLI or Citizens for Conservation, they're more focused on those very high C-value, very high quality restorations. They want to get as close to a remnant ecosystem as possible. In the village of Algonquin, we don't have any remnant systems left. We're working with very degraded areas, and our goal is not to get back to a remnant, high-quality prairie, but we want to get 70% of the way there. We want to have, the bang for your buck plants that are giving those ecosystem services that are maintainable and also able to be constructed at a reasonable cost, because we don't have a huge volunteer base. We don't have local seed sources to make wonderfully diverse mixes. So we're more of that bang for your buck, what's going to get us, 70% of that way to that remnant ecosystem. A couple of design considerations. Aha, got a laser, I love lasers. This is another shot of Woods Creek, Trails of Woods Creek restoration that Michelle was talking about. When you're looking at designing these naturalized detention basins, it's really important that you're involved from the concept phase, working with the engineers or the developer when these are built. They're built a little bit differently than your normal turf grass basins. Really important to have this area here from normal water level down to about 6 to 12 inches below normal water level. It's a shelf for emergent plants that like to be submerged most of the time in that shallow area. Those plants will grow up and they will do a lot of things for this basin. They will stabilize the soil. They will act as a filter. They will help keep the nutrient levels down in the water. And then a lot of times, if you choose the right plants, something like pickerel weed, it ends up being really pretty, has a really beautiful flower to it. So those are a lot different, where a lot of the detention basins, it's a 3-to-1 slope to the normal water line, and then it dives off and you don't have that nice emergent plant zone shelf. Above normal water line, it's important to use the hydrographs or the bounce, so when it rains, when the water comes up and drops back down, you gotta look at those hydrographs and be able to plan out your seed mix, keeping those in mind, because each of these basins acts a little bit differently, and you have to site the plants in the correct zone, because in that area where it bounces, you have to have plants that can be out of water some of the time, can be inundated with water for a day, 2 days, even up to a week. So it's really important to have that kind of wet prairie zone in that bounce as that pond fills and drains over time. And then above that, you can have your more mesic, your drier species above that high water level on the pond. For stream design, this is in Lake in the Hills, a section of Woods Creek, Reach 11. It's really important to have that floodplain bench. What that does is when it rains, the water will come up and it will spread out onto the floodplain bench. It does a few things. It slows the water down, reduces the amount of erosive forces that it has. Also allows times for the plants to soak up those nutrients, and also to let that water percolate down through the soil. As Scott had mentioned earlier, all of our drinking water comes from groundwater in McHenry County. So having that recharge and that slowing down of the water to keep it going into those shallow aquifers is key to sustainability for our drinking water. And nowhere is that more important than here in McHenry County. So having those established floodplain benches to allow that recharge is very, very important. Here's a project that we completed in 2023. This is in the Jelke Creek watershed, Dixie Creek Reach 3. This actually feeds into a Dundee Township property, Dixie Briggs From. This is before photo, where you've got all this invasive species in here that are just kind of clogging everything up. It was really hard to walk through there. It was kind of like fighting to get through this area. We had lots of erosion. where the stream bank was just collapsing into the stream. This is what I like to call the bomb just went off phase. So this is where I get probably the most questions and the most complaints, because we come in, and this is where you see all the trash. You see like little kids' toys. We've found tents, we found cars, we found buckets, you name it. It's in there, and you find it all when the trees come down. But here you can really see the condition of the stream. It's severely eroded on the banks. There's really no connection to that floodplain bench. After it's constructed, you can see we've kind of shallowed out those slopes. We've got a nice bench here that the water can flow over when it comes up. And here's just a week after it was completed. It looks all nice and pretty with the erosion control blanket on there. Once again, I want to point out the importance of this spot here, the floodplain bench. We've got armoring here on the outside bend of some of these to prevent erosion from cutting into the bank. And then on this side, in this cross section, you can see the floodplain bench that's set right at that bank full elevation. So when you get that 2 to 6 month rainfall, the water will spread out and slow down. This is the site from the same spot just 1 year after the completion. So within short order, these areas start to bounce back pretty quickly. We were even getting some of the Rudbeckia blooming in that first season. So it's really nice to see it green up. I don't have a more current picture than this, but eventually, within a few years, you won't see a lot of the stone unless you're down there walking the site. A lot of people will walk by this and think it's always looked like that nobody's been in there. Little do they know all of the design, all the maintenance, and all the work that went into these, but that's kind of the intention, is that 95% of the people are gonna walk by and be like, oh, look at this. It's a beautiful stream with a beautiful prairie. Some of the lessons that we've learned implementing these projects over the years, one of them is the importance of construction oversight. So you have these plans that are drawn up, and then you hand it off to a contractor. You need somebody on site who knows how to read and interpret those plans, who's on the team of the owner to be able to advocate for the proper construction. They're checking things, they're double checking things, they're triple checking things. One of the issues we had in one of our projects is that bankful elevation was set too high. So the banks were up higher than they should be. And we had installed these massive rocks. Each of these rocks is hundreds and hundreds of pounds in these cross vein structures. And what happened with that bankful elevation being set at the wrong height? When we had a rain event, the water would rush down and created a big pool, a scour pool. And within just a couple months, you can see the blanket, nothing has even germinated yet. So within a matter of months, first couple rain events, we had these big rocks falling into the scour pool. And on this site, every one of the cross veins was in a state of failure. Looked into it, and it turns out the design wasn't installed per plan. So we worked with the contractor. We were able to get these rebuilt within short order, and now it's been 2 years with these cross veins rebuilt. They're totally stable, don't have any issues. But the big lesson learned there is making sure that you have that good oversight of these projects as they go in. Another lesson learned is early on when we started doing some of these projects, knowing what to put in and more importantly, what not to put in your seed mix is really key. Specific lesson here are the silphium plants, so cup plant in particular. Great native plant, I love it. Gets really big, grows like crazy, goldfinches love it, all the birds love it. Problem is, it's kind of a bully. You put it out there, especially on these smaller sites, within a couple years, you got nothing but cup plant. And it gets really big, 12, 13 feet. Stems don't really break down in the winter. So this site, we actually had to go in and remove the cup plant, which is easier said than done. The roots go down 15 to 20 feet for the silphiums. So we removed it, and then we had to go through with an overseeder and overseed these areas. So we were actually out there treating what is a native plant, but it was coming to the point of being a monoculture on these smaller sites. There are some other species that kind of fall into that, bully of the prairie. Big blue stem, Indian grass, New England aster. There's a few of those that we've learned they just don't really work well on these small sites in the more suburban environments. Another lesson learned is a restoration project we did in 2013. This was tied with an IDOT bypass project, if you know the Route 31 bypass that goes around to the west of downtown Algonquin. We relocated a section of the Crystal Creek outlet during that project, and we found out during some regular monitoring that the stream bank was eroding. This is right after construction. This blue line was where it had eroded to. So within 10 years, we had lost about 10 feet of the bank that had eroded. Found that after a burn. I like to walk the sites because you can see everything really well, and I was like, uh-oh, Houston, we got a problem. Got to take care of this. So put together a plan to get it permitted, took it to our board to get approved. Like Michelle said, we have tons of support from our board, and we got this fixed. So this is what the site looked like before, and this is after the emergency repair was done, where we went in, pulled back those banks, actually built it back up a little bit, put in some stone toe protection, and got that stabilized. So the big takeaway there is just because the project is done, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have to go back in and do touch-ups. This was a big touch-up. We try to catch them before they get that big. But nonetheless, once the project is done, it doesn't mean you just walk away and you go, okay, it's a restoration, we're done, see ya. Now what I really like to talk about, maintenance. In some ways, this is the difficult part of the project. Establishment maintenance, the first 3 to 5 years are really key to the establishment of these sites. That's when the site's been disturbed, you get all these opportunistic, early successional species that come in, your ragweeds, clovers, and they go, ooh, we got all this new habitat, let's grow up. So all of a sudden, you've got all these weeds, and people come by and be like, looks like that project just full of weeds. I'm like, yep, it is. First year, it's like 70% weeds. That's why we go in and mow it. That establishment maintenance is more hands-on, it's more intensive. It's something that takes a lot more effort. So it's important to have that adaptive management to be able to call your crew and say, hey, we need you out here. We've got some sweet clover that's blooming. Ragweed's going crazy. Typically has higher cost than your long-term maintenance, so it's really important. We build that into a lot of our projects to have that first 3 years of establishment maintenance in place when we sign the contract. Maintenance is going to be different than your normal traditional landscaping maintenance. There's specialized equipment, specialized knowledge, specialized things that you don't want to mess up, i.e. prescribed burning. So it's very important to have a trained crew or an educated and trained contractor conduct this work. Can't just hire a normal landscaper that does your traditional landscapes and expect them to do a good job. Good example here is this is Crystal Creek down in Town Park. This is all reed canary grass that was sprayed. The crew just spot sprays. They know how to identify the species we want to target. They'll go in and spray just the species we want to hit. This is a Marshmaster, really amazing piece of equipment. They're about $300,000 with this setup, and this has a wick bar that's wicking Phragmites and leaving all the good vegetation underneath it alone because it's only contact herbicide. It's not a broadcast spray. That's a very specialized piece of equipment. There's only a few of them in the state. Really important to have those tools at your disposal to be able to maintain these areas. Within the village of Algonquin, we do a 3-year rotating schedule for the long-term maintenance. So year 1, we end up doing a prescribed burn and a quick post-burn herbicide visit. Year 2, we will go through and hit that site multiple times doing maintenance, mowing, spot spraying. And then year 3, we will monitor and do small touch-ups as needed. And then we rotate through, so every 3 years, each site is getting one of those treatments. Some of the benefits, we've already talked about a lot of these. There's a lot of those ancillary benefits with these restorations, habitat restoration, get more biodiversity, get a lot more pollinators, a lot more flora and fauna come back to those areas. You got the deep root systems that help rebuild soil health and recharge our shallow water aquifers. Cost benefits, the village of Algonquin, we see a cost benefit on the long-term maintenance of the naturalized areas as opposed to the traditional landscaping. Here are some current numbers. 2025, We have 161 turf sites in the village of Algonquin, totaling 220 acres. We spend $460,000 a year in the maintenance of those sites. We have 56 sites totaling 445, so almost double the acreage of restored natural areas, and we spend about $150,000 a year for those established naturalized sites. So over time, that benefit will pay off. In the village, when we have a property, we're not going to get rid of that property. We're in it for the long haul. We're in it for the long term. So these savings will add up over time. Some of the successes, real quick, because I'm running out of time, I got a problem with really taking a long time and talking through these things. We have a big network in the village of Algonquin. This is a shot of all of our restored and unrestored natural areas. Green is restored, red are ones that are on the list to be restored. We've got about 50% of our open spaces restored. We've received, like Michelle said, about $1.5 million in grant funding over the past 20 years and $14 million in completed projects. We are now working on, we've updated our plans, our watershed plans. We're continuing to update, go after new grants, construct new projects. And then we're also working on public outreach and education, trying to engage more with the community, engage more with volunteers, and get more people involved, because we really want to build a grassroots network that embeds this green infrastructure into the fabric of the community and have it be something that will perpetuate into the future and not be something that, you know, kind of fades away or gets forgotten about in the future. And with that, and like 30 seconds to spare, I will turn it back over to Scott.
So our next speaker is not nearly as dynamic as the previous speakers, but I'll try and do my best. You know, what Brad was talking about, I would think it's really important to understand the benefits of green infrastructure. All the stuff that we're talking about today is wonderful, very thoughtful, but it's also very practical. I think the numbers that Brad showed, just the dramatic cost savings of naturalized areas that are done right and maintained properly are just unbelievable. But there are so many other benefits that go along with that. We are experiencing more intense storm events now than we have in the past. A 6-inch storm used to be a catastrophic event. Now a 6-inch storm is a storm. And the work that the village of Algonquin has done, when they have a 6-inch storm now, they are not staying up at night sweating bullets. They're having to pay attention to things, but the green infrastructure is helping to manage that stormwater. And they are able to either postpone or eliminate capital projects, replacement culverts underneath roadways. They don't need to do that because the infrastructure above that roadway is absorbing and infiltrating that water. Everything we're talking about today is extremely practical. And as a county, we want to emulate what the village of Algonquin has done, and we would like to help empower our communities to emulate the successes that the village of Algonquin have done as well. So we are, as a county, are working towards a countywide watershed management plan initiative. What this does is our goal is to complete watershed plans throughout the entire county. And this is to improve water quality and to reduce flooding. We will help organize watershed groups, evaluate the condition of our waterways, identify areas with flooding and water quality issues, develop potential projects to address those flooding and water quality issues. We want to get to the level of detail that you get with a sub-watershed plan, but do this on a much larger scale. A single sub-watershed plan can take 2 to 3 years to do. That's just incredibly labor intensive. If we can work on a county level to do this, the idea would be that we would be able to achieve an economy of scale, still get to the same level of granularity as a sub-watershed plan, but do this at a much larger scale, which would provide economic benefits and also accelerate the pace with which we can accomplish these things. As Cecily had talked about, we have 2 main watersheds in the county. So the west half of the county, the water flows to the Kishwaukee River. The east half of the county, the water flows to the Kishwaukee watershed, or the Fox River. We basically have a mini continental divide right here in McHenry County. It's roughly Route 14, so it really is pretty interesting. But what we're going to do is we want to break the county up into 3 primary watersheds. So the Kishwaukee River would be a complete watershed, but we'd break up the Fox River watershed into 2 primary watersheds. So you'd have the Fox River watershed and the Nippersink Creek watershed. Now the Nippersink Creek watershed is a significant water body, we have a great watershed group that has already done a comprehensive stormwater or a comprehensive water-based plan for the Nippersink Creek. So the groundwork has already been laid. So this makes a lot of sense. It's intuitive. It also ties into our county's Wetland Restoration Fund. So there's a lot of continuity. We're creating a system that supports itself. Within each of these primary watersheds is a large number of sub-watersheds. So as Cecily was talking about, all the streams that feed to the Kishwaukee River, all the streams that feed to the Fox River, and all the streams that feed to Nippersink Creek are sub-watersheds that provide a boundary that we can look at, identify problems within those boundaries, and have a manageable sized area to work with. So we have already done a lot of watershed plans in the county. That's part of why a lot of us are so proud of our county. We really have an engaged community. And so a lot of watershed plans have been done for the county. Now, not all of these meet the EPA's 9 criteria. So Marengo did a study, but it was more of a demographic and economic study. It's going to provide a lot of great demographic information for us to use. But it's not a watershed-based plan. In the Kish, we have 2 sub-watershed plans that have been done. But in the Fox River watershed, we have a lot of watershed plans that have been done. But a lot of these are over 10 years old and need to be updated. And then, like I said, the Nippersink Creek has an amazing watershed plan, but that's over 10 years too, so that needs to be updated. The way we would approach this is we would focus on the Kishwaukee River watershed first. It needs the most work. And so we would first focus on the Kishwaukee River watershed. The next primary watershed we would focus on is the Fox River watershed. So there are a lot of watershed-based plans already done for that, but they need to be updated. The gaps need to be filled in, and then there needs to be continuity between those plans and the Kishwaukee River watershed plan. And then the third phase would be the Nippersink Creek watershed, which once again has a great watershed plan, but it does need to be updated and have continuity with the other watershed plans. This is not just talk. We are moving forward with this. We just signed a contract with Cecily Coons from Baxter Woodman. So we are really moving forward with this. The goal is to create a strategic plan that is a solid game plan to complete the broader countywide watershed planning initiative. Cecily will be identifying stream segments and other resources in each of the sub-watersheds that need to be investigated. And this is critically important because by having all this information identified, we can identify how much it's going to cost to do this area, how much it's going to cost to do this area. So as funding opportunities, different grants come on board, we can hop on those things very quickly and get the funding to accomplish these things. And then identify the task and the sequencing that is needed to be conducted for each of these watershed plans. In the meantime, we've also created a great resource that we're very proud of. Stoyan Kolev is the division manager for the Water Resources Division, and he worked with our GIS division to create an interactive watershed planning tool. So anybody can go onto here and identify areas that are prone to flooding or water quality issues. So you go on the website, you have different map layers you can turn on, so you can turn on the stream names, the wetland areas, the HUC boundaries, the watershed boundaries, and then you can also look at aerial photos going from 2022 to 1939. So you can look at your areas of interest, look at the land use changes over time. Some years are wet, some years are dry, so you can really get a better understanding of where you're looking. This is something I put in, and so this is an area on Queen Anne Road that is prone to flooding. Every time we have major rain events, this is flooded with flowing water, and that flowing water makes it particularly dangerous. So I identified where the area is. You can create either just a dot showing the location or create a polygon. You put an explanation of why this is an issue, And then you can even put a photo. So this is an actual photo of the area I'm concerned with. And so this empowers the community to actually have a voice. You don't have to wait 2 years for a watershed meeting to talk about these things. Anytime you see an issue or have concerns, you can go onto this website and put your information in. This is a tool to empower individuals and communities. And we are really excited about this. We really want to take everything that Algonquin has done and take it to a county level. And the main goal of this is to empower all the stakeholders, the municipalities, the townships, and others that participate.